The personal prayer language is for my own edification, whereas the gift of tongues is for the edification of the church. This lesson is entitled Gift of Tongues. It is the fifth on the series of pneumatology, the study of the Holy Spirit. In the previous session, we looked at tongues, a personal prayer language. We found that this was for our personal edification, that it was not to be interpreted, that it was for our own revelation and teaching, and it was to encourage us by bringing us into the presence of God through praise, thanksgiving. The gift of tongues. The gift of tongues is different from the personal prayer language. It is given by the Holy Spirit to some for the edification of the church. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the profit of all. To another, different kinds of tongues. To another, the interpretation of tongues. Although anyone who desires may have the personal prayer language of tongues, only those whom the Spirit gives it to are able to operate in the gift of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Are all workers of miracles? And do all have gifts of healings? Do all speak with tongues? Do all interpret? Here we see in regard to the ministries that the gift of tongues is not for all, just in the same way as not all are apostles or prophets or teachers. The gift of interpretation of tongues. Another of the listed gifts of the Holy Spirit is interpretation of tongues. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the profit of all. To another, different kinds of tongues. To another, the interpretation of tongues. The gift of tongues is to be interpreted. I wish you all spoke with tongues, but even more that you prophesied. For he who prophesies is greater than he who speaks with tongues, unless he interprets, that the church may receive edification. Interpretation is not for the personal prayer language, as we are speaking mysteries to God and no one understands it. But when it comes to the gift of tongues, it must be interpreted, so others in the church may be edified as well. Whereas for those who are speaking in tongues, it is for their own edification. The purpose of the gift of tongues is to edify the church in a similar manner to the gift of prophecy. I wish you all spoke with tongues, but even more that you prophesied. For he who prophesies is greater than he who speaks with tongues, unless indeed he interprets, that the church may receive edification. Did you notice that the gift of tongues is for the benefit of all? The gift of tongues is to bring revelation. But now, brethren, if I come to you speaking with tongues, what shall I profit you unless I speak to you either by revelation, by knowledge, by prophesying, or by teaching? The purpose of the gift of tongues is to bring revelation, prophecy, teaching, and knowledge. Various languages in the gift of tongues. First of all, there are earthly languages, as was seen on the day of Pentecost. And when the sound occurred, the multitude came together and were confused, because everyone heard them speak in his own language. There are, it may be, so many kinds of languages in the world, and none of them is without significance. Therefore, if I do not know the meaning of the language, I shall be a foreigner to him who speaks, and he who speaks will be a foreigner to me. The gift of tongues can also be the language of angels, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels. And finally, the gift of tongues is a sign to the unbeliever. Therefore, tongues are for a sign, not to those who believe, but to unbelievers. Therefore, if the whole church comes together in one place and all speak with tongues, and there comes in those who are uninformed or unbelievers, will they not say that you are out of your mind? But if all prophesy and an unbeliever, an uninformed person comes in, he is convinced by all, he is convicted by all, and thus the secrets of his heart are revealed, and so falling down on his face, he will worship God and report that God is truly among you. So here Paul is saying that the gift of tongues is a sign for the unbeliever. And for this reason, he is saying that we should not all speak in tongues at the same time for the purpose of bringing a message to the church. He is not saying that we cannot speak in tongues in our personal prayer language in church. He is saying that those who have the gift of tongues should not all speak at the same time, but that they should wait until it is interpreted. In summary then, our personal prayer language is speaking mysteries to God for our own edification. The gift of tongues, however, is to edify the church and must be interpreted. The Holy Spirit gives the gift to some, whereas the personal prayer language is for any who want to receive it through faith. The gift of tongues is to encourage the church through either teaching, prophecy, revelation, or knowledge, and the gift of tongues is a sign to the unbeliever or uninformed person. Can I encourage you, first of all, to develop your personal prayer language, and then to ask God for the gift of tongues? I have a personal prayer language, and I also have the gift of tongues. And what I have found is that it is a completely different language, or even languages, when I prophesy or speak a revelation or teach in tongues, then it is a different language from my personal prayer language. The personal prayer language is for my own edification, whereas the gift of tongues is for the edification of the church.